So we were able to be at practice, only about 15 minutes of that first practice. It was very hectic, but I want to get your thoughts. We're going to discuss, just essentially what was your first impressions of new offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson, watching him, listening to people talk, and just your thoughts on him.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that stood out was just the type of drills that we got to watch. Uh, as you mentioned, we didn't get to watch the whole practice, so I think that's fair to say, just to put out there. But in terms of the individual drills that we got to watch the quarterback group in particular run, it was a much different approach than what we saw last year with the Josh Gaddis offense and, Frank Ponce coaching that position group, the quarterback position group. What we saw was them working on a lot of quick game, a lot of bubble screen looks. And, to me, that's just further evidence. I mean, we already knew this, but this is going to be more of an air raidy type of offense, getting the ball out quickly in space. We saw that essentially too during the Rhett Lashley era. Um, but yeah, the skill work that we saw on day one was about kind of getting the ball out as quick as you can to your playmakers in space. Um, we didn't really see much of that type of skill work under the Josh Gaddis offense and leadership. So that was just kind of like the first thing that stood out to me was those type of drills.
Yeah, there were two things in particular, not just with the drills. There were two things that stood out to me. I want to get to both of these things that Tyler Van Dyke said about Coach Dawson when he was asked after practice, his thoughts on him, the offense. And I want to get into that. The first one, David, it kind of says what we've been thinking, wondering about the tempo. And one thing that Tyler said is he feels like it's a mix of speeding it up and they will huddle up. And I think that's interesting. I wasn't quite sure because, just kind of sometimes with these air raid stuff, it doesn't automatically mean they're gonna go tempo, tempo, tempo. And Tyler did indicate that they will, and they'll also huddle up. They'll kind of mix it up, and that's what stood out to me in terms of what Tyler said afterwards. And as we get into being able to watch them go against defense, hopefully we'll be able to see some of that during spring ball. I think maybe we'll get a chance to see that if they're trying to do tempo. But the drill stood out. You're right. In terms of that, I saw that too with the tempo. There was a drill where they're really doing quick passes, about 3 passes per quarterback, 1, 2, 3, and it's really fun watching quarterbacks at that level. A guy like Tyler, and I thought Jakari did well too in terms of just getting the ball out quick. It's crazy how fast they do. I remember D'Eriq King was really good at that too, just getting the ball and good footwork and making accurate throws, and so that was good to see.
And building on that, I went and looked at the PFF numbers and the way they kind of track how quickly a quarterback gets the ball out is 2.5 seconds is kind of their marker. It's somewhat arbitrary, but they, under 2.5 seconds, you're getting it out relatively quick. Over, it's kind of a long drawn out play, or you're scrambling, et cetera, et cetera. But you look at the 2022 numbers compared to 2021 for Tyler Van Dyke in terms of getting the ball out quicker than 2.5 seconds. And it is a noticeable difference in terms of production. The efficiency was similar. So last year in 2022, he completed 67% of his attempts when getting the ball out faster than 2.5 seconds for 985 yards, only 5 touchdowns, and he threw 3 interceptions. You compare that to the previous year with Rhett Lashley, 71% completion rate, so slightly better, but 1,400 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. And honestly, too, year over year, in terms of those dropbacks of getting the ball out quick, in 2021, he only had about 25 more dropbacks compared to 2022 when getting the ball out quickly. So to me, that says, I do think there's going to be parallels between Rhett Lashley and Shannon Dawson in terms of the approach. To me, it says, look, the spread principled offense just has better opportunities to get the ball out quickly. And in the air raid, the quick passing game essentially is viewed as a way to stay ahead of the chains, kind of similar to a run game. It's an extension of running the football. And you look at Clayton Tune last year, who Shannon Dawson coached at Houston. When he got the ball out in 2.5 seconds, he threw 20 touchdowns on the year, which was the seventh most touchdowns in the country when getting the ball out quick. So, and also too, when I think back to 2021, just anecdotally, I don't know if this is true, but it feels like it's true. I think in 2021, Tyler Van Dyke was one of the better red zone quarterbacks in the ACC. That wasn't really the case in 2022. He didn't have much success throwing touchdowns when he got in the red zone last year. So I think the hope is, look, I think too, quick game in the air raid raises efficiency. Ideally, it lessens the negative plays when you get the ball out quick as well, which is an area they do need to improve year over year as well. Um, but I think too, that's just kind of like the foundation of what Shannon Dawson's going to start building this new offense on. And, you go from there, build it out, the passing game from there.
Last year, not only was Tyler Van Dyke making that transition with the new offense, we talked so much about that with going to that new offense with Gaddis, with what he wanted to do, but the receivers, Mike Harley and Charleston Rambo had moved on. And Tyler was really hoping and would say this, in interview sessions, he really wanted wide receivers to step up and make plays. And a lot of that, if we go back and look at the 22 season, it went up and down throughout. Keyshawn Smith started, then lost his role. Restrepo got hurt. Colby Young emerged. There was just a lot of in and out in terms of playing time. And I think this year, even though, a guy like Keyshawn moved on, most of the guys are back. And Colby Young is a guy that I'm curious to see how he takes that next step. Tyler was very complimentary of him. There's something that Tyler said there, and I still want to get to this other point that he said about Coach Dawson a little bit later, but what he said about Colby, and I think this is very important to Tyler, is a guy that can go up and get it. He says this kind of routinely. He tends to like those kind of receivers. So, he's hoping Colby takes that next jump. He does feel like he is a different player already. He looks like a different player when we're out there just because of the number change going to number 4 there. But Colby's going to take that jump. It looks like in terms of his leadership, he definitely is going to be a lot more comfortable than he was a year ago going into the season because he arrived late and still made plays. And I think he's the guy to look for at the wide receiver position. Isaiah Horton's a guy we don't know much about because we didn't see him a lot, but he's another guy that maybe during the spring ball, certainly be paying attention to him. He's another big receiver. And I think just the way Tyler talks about it, I think he likes those kind of guys, and we'll see if Frank can kind of make that jump as well.
Yeah, to me, the wide receiver position for Miami this year, it's kind of one of those both things can be true situations where, look, is the group overly talented where they're going to just overwhelm opponents with their pure talent? Probably not. But can they still be much more productive year over year if Shannon Dawson's system can get them opportunities in space more often? I think so. I think this group can produce much better year over year. I don't think it's like I don't have a doom and gloom type of feel with this group. And similar to what you're saying, right? With a Colby Young, if you just kind of simplify things and make him your deep threat on the outside, for whatever reason, Tyler Van Dyke seems more comfortable throwing the deep ball than he does necessarily the short game. And he's very good at it. And if you give him that type of target, you're going to generate explosive plays that way. I think, we referenced the quick game, the bubble screen game, that plays into what I think in terms of the depth is the strength of the wide receiver group. You have Xavier Restrepo, Rashard Smith, Nathaniel Ray Joseph, the early enrollee freshman. Robbie Washington, I think, can play on the outside or in the slot. You could give him those opportunities. And you look last year, right? I mean, the air raid, we saw this with Charleston Rambo. The air raid type of offense isn't afraid to just hammer targets to the best option. We saw this last year with Houston, with Nathaniel Tank Dell, stud receiver, NFL receiver, over 150 targets on the year. But he was a guy they gave him bubbles. They worked him deep, worked him in the intermediate game. So I think this spring it's important for Shannon Dawson to really have a good grasp on what they have at the wide receiver position. Last year, I felt like, the coaching staff wasn't necessarily too excited about the wide receiver position, but they thought, okay, we can kind of coach around it. And they didn't go out and get transfers after the spring. And, I think if Shannon Dawson feels like after this spring, hey, we need to upgrade this group, I hope they're much more aggressive year over year in trying to find solutions rather than complain about the problems. If they feel like it's a group that still year over year isn't quite there.
The other thing that Tyler Van Dyke said, and I want to make sure I got the full quote, but again, talking about the offense, they're looking to improve on those marks. They read 9th and 10th, either one of those spots on the 4 major categories. So certainly they're looking to improve their offense from a year ago. But he said, we just have to execute. That was, Van Dyke just talking about the offense, essentially, regardless who the guy is. But he said, that's what it's all about. Coach Dawson is going to let us play, let us be free, and let us be playmakers. He doesn't criticize you and all that. So it's good. He lets us play. The criticized part, certainly we heard a lot of different things from how things were with the other offensive coordinator and Coach Gaddis. It's a different attitude, different mindset. This typically happens anytime you have a major coaching change, whether it's coordinator, head coach, we see that quite a bit. And it's just a different personality. So it's going to be interesting to see how Tyler responds to it, and how they all work with Coach Dawson moving forward. And communication, Tyler mentioned that's also a key as well.
Yeah, and I think you would agree with this. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think, look, on the front end, any coaching style can work. So if if we're going to put him in the box of being a tough, hard-nosed coach, that can work. Did it necessarily fit at Miami last year? I think, look, we're looking back in hindsight. Yeah, I think it might have been a tough fit. Shannon Dawson, from everything I hear, I do think his personality is closer to what Rhett Lashlee was at Miami in 2021. We all know Rhett Lashlee, Tyler Van Dyke had a lot of success that year, and they were on the same page. I also think in general, Chris, it helps that Shannon Dawson is the OC quarterback coach. That's a tough dynamic that Josh Gaddis had to navigate being the OC wide receivers coach. It just makes things a little bit harder to be on the same page with the quarterback room and also have to coach the wide receiver room. So, look, I think to me, the quarterback position is one where I think there is benefit to trying to instill confidence in that position group. It's the hardest position in all of football to play. It is an insanely hard position, when everything they have to account for on a given play. And so I do think there's something to positive reinforcement. And I do think, honestly, Tyler is a guy that is his hardest critic on his own. So does he necessarily need a coach to pile on at times? Of course, that's what you have to do as a coach. But if you're viewed as a type of guy that never lifts up his players, I think that can be tough from a mental standpoint for anyone. And I don't think it's just Tyler that feels that way, honestly, just my understanding from last year's situation. So you're right. When you make a coaching change that's drastic, it's fairly common to go to the opposite direction in terms of personality. And I do think that's what they're going to get this year with Shannon Dawson.
Yeah, personalities can always work out. We see it NFL wise. A guy like Tony Dungy, with the success he had as a coach, certainly had a different personality than a guy like Bill Belichick. Josh Gaddis, we're speaking about him. He had plenty of success at Michigan, going to the playoffs the year before he got to Miami. It just didn't work out. Shannon Dawson's in. We'll see how everything kind of transpires moving forward with the energy and everything like that with Tyler Van Dyke and his improvement. Tyler also said, leave you with this. Guys are tired of losing. They know the 5-7 record. They know the reality of the situation. And it kind of has a sense this spring that they've got that mentality of a little bit of an underdog feel to it. It doesn't have as much hype as it did a year ago with coaches and players and everything. I think maybe they're just going to be, working throughout the spring, just kind of concentrate on the work. So we'll see how it goes. Tyler, certainly one to watch. For people watching this, drop below in the comments. If there's a subject or a topic during spring you want us to hit on, definitely drop in the comments below. But I definitely appreciate you, David, for providing great insight, great stuff on the PFF numbers and all that. We can always find more information like that on the website, InsideTheU.com. I want to thank everybody for watching. Hopefully you have a good rest of the day and take care.